911. What's your emergency?
Hello.
You go first. No, you go first.
There's a house on top of a hill that, for decades, has fueled gossip, disappearances, and stories no one wants to believe. A house where cameras fail, sounds distort, and people disappear. For years, authorities ignored the signals, but everything changed one silent morning when a call pierced the 911 dispatcher's radio waves. A call that came from a place where no one lived anymore. An abandoned house. A house sealed by fear. What seemed like just another incident became the darkest case in the city's police history. A seasoned officer went in and was never the same again. Bones were found. Voices were heard. And to this day, no one can explain what really happened inside an Hill House. This story is told by someone who experienced it firsthand. The 911 operator who received that dreaded call. It's based on official records, never before released recordings, and the final words of someone who disappeared forever. If you think haunted houses are just movie inventions, prepare to have your mind changed. Dim the lights, turn up the volume. And stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a ghost story, it's a warning. 911. What is your emergency? This is a phrase I repeat every day, hundreds of times. Most of the calls are noise from neighbors, family arguments, or some false alarm. But that night, the call came from the house at the top of the hill, a property that, for decades, no one dared to approach. It was around 2:13 in the morning. The line was static, just a hiss. And for a second, I almost hung up, until I heard a low, drawn-out laugh, a woman's laugh. There was no one else on the line, but the number was registered. The location was exact, 32 Willow Hill Drive, the house on the hill. Have you heard of the Hill House, right? Those stories about missing teenagers, strange rituals, objects burned in the backyard. People make up a lot of things, but you know what's worse than rumors? When a trained police officer returns from there and is never the same again. Officer Darren responded to the scene, an experienced, calm, and fearless officer. He wasn't the type to be easily frightened, but that call, that house, it changed him forever. Today I will tell what really happened that night, based on official reports, radio recordings, the files I could find, and something else. What Darren told me personally, a week before disappearing. This is a true story, and if you think haunted houses are just movies, you'll change your mind before the end of this video. Before we continue, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. Comment below. Would you answer a call from Hill House? Now, get ready. Turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and join me on this descent into hell. Because the story that begins with a laugh ends with screams. I remember Darren's voice on the radio that early morning. He had acknowledged the call. Dispatch, I'm en route to 32 Willow Hill Drive. No apparent movement, clear skies, low temperature. But there was a pause in his voice. Something subtle. As it is, he was holding his breath without realizing it. Willow Hill sat atop a hill covered in dense trees. It was a dead neighborhood, literally. The last active house there was abandoned in the 1990s. Since then, only the gray mansion with dusty windows and a cursed reputation remains. Security cameras weren't picking up any signal from the property. No movement for months. So why, at 2:13 a.m., did a call come from there? Darren arrived shortly after 2:30. He reported, gate open, no sign of forced entry, no lights on. House is silent. I asked him to wait for backup, but he laughed nervously. He said it must be some kind of teenage prank. But even so, he drew his gun. Still, he climbed the 3 porch steps as if he were stepping into a graveyard. Over the radio, the sound changed. The silence became oppressive. It was as if even the wind was afraid to touch that house. Front door open. No signs of forced entry. He reported, I'm going in for questioning. If anyone is there, this is the police. Silence. The only thing I heard on the line was a slight creaking sound, like a door was being pushed open, very slowly, then a crack, like old wood bending under the weight of a body. I repeated, "Darren, do you confirm entry, everything under control?" It took a few seconds. Then he replied, "Something is strange. The house has no smell. None. Not mold, not dust. It seems frozen in time." It was at that moment that I felt a chill, even here, far away at my post. Not because of what he said, but by the way he said it, as if he were trying to rationalize something his mind already knew wasn't rational. The house, from the outside, just looked old, but inside, she was waiting. The transmission became choppy shortly after Darren joined. The radio crackled. Little static cuts between each sentence. Empty main hall. A chandelier on the ceiling, covered in cobwebs. Moldy carpets. Then, silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Then, the laughter. It came as a whisper in the background. Sharp, feminine, false, as if someone was trying to imitate a human laugh and couldn't. "Dispatch, did you hear that?" He whispered into the radio. "There's someone here, upstairs." I asked him to wait. I asked him not to go up alone, but he was already leaving. Darren was never one to wait. He climbed step by step. Each step creaked like a warning, as if the house protested against his presence. "You have footprints in the dust," he reported. "Bare feet, small ones, going to the back room." The temperature at my station seemed to have dropped. I heard everything, but I couldn't do anything. Darren's voice was tighter, lower. "There are toys in the hallway, a broken doll, a teddy bear with no eyes." He approached the room, door ajar. Moonlight shines through the cracks. Something moved inside. And then, silence. By 22 seconds, no sound came from the line. I called him on the radio. "Darren, respond. Darren, respond." Nothing. Until he came back. But not with words. With a scream. Not a scream of pain, but of shock. Absolute terror. She was there. Sitting. A girl. Pale. With her back to me. I asked him to describe it better, but he was already upset. When I called, she turned, but her face, God, her face was distorted, as if she didn't know what form to take. He backed away. He tried to leave the room, but the door slammed shut behind him with a bang. It closed by itself. "It's locked. I swear no one touched it." The laughter returned, but now it was coming from inside the room. And then, from every corner of the house, it echoed off the walls, the ceiling, the floor, as if the house were alive and mocking him. The radio cut out. Hissing. Interference. But I heard something else. In the background. A sound. Like bones cracking. Like something crawling. Darren began to pray, quietly, like a desperate whisper. Then, out of nowhere, the door opened. He ran out of the room, tripping, falling in the hallway. But he didn't go down the stairs. He went up, to the attic. I shouted into the radio, "Darren, get out of the house. You're out of control. Reinforcements are on the way. Get out now." But he replied something that chilled me to the bone. "She called me by name. How does she know my name?" "Break." Then he whispered, "The voice belonged to my sister, but she died years ago." Silence. And then, the attic door closed behind him. After the attic door closed, the radio went silent. For whole minutes, I tried to contact him. I screamed. Nothing. Then came the whisper, "I have something here with me." Darren's voice was different. Weak. Trembling. He no longer seemed like the police officer we knew. He looked like a boy lost in a place that should never have existed. The ground here is covered in small footprints, hundreds, all barefoot, as if children have been dancing here for years. Then he described the smell. It's not mold, not blood. It's like burnt, but sweet, like burnt meat with sugar. And then he stopped talking. Seconds later, his breathing became labored. "There's a closet, in the corner. It's ajar. I think something's inside." I gripped the phone tightly. The feeling was one of absolute helplessness. The radio picked up the sound of creaking wood, and then something hit the closet from the inside out. 1, 2, 3 times, as if he wanted to leave, or draw attention. Darren approached. "There's something engraved on the door. Break. My name is scratched here, with a fingernail, and there are other names below. Many, all scratched, except mine. He started hyperventilating. He tried to keep the gun steady, but his voice was shaking, and that's when everything changed. He said that the attic was transformed. The space, why, the light, the temperature. The house was somehow digging his mind. I'm seeing flashes. I don't know if they're my memories or hers. Darren began to describe visions. Amanda, the young woman who disappeared in that house years before. She's in a room, crying, locked in, alone. Her mother yells at her, tells her she needs to accept the presence, that the house wants to choose her. The most terrifying, Darren never read Amanda's case in detail. This information was not in the open police files. He saw from her point of view. The closet opens, and I step inside. There's a trapdoor inside. She goes down, crawls into a dark tunnel, and down there, something is waiting. Something. She calls, "Bone, Father." Darren started to cry. She died here, but that wasn't all. She stayed, trapped, divided between the rooms like fragments. And then, amidst the crying and rapid breathing, he stopped, and he said something I will never forget. I can feel what she felt. Loneliness, fear, abandonment. She begged to be heard, and the house promised she would never be alone again. For the first time, I understood that this wasn't just a supernatural occurrence. It was a living prison, and she needed company. The cabinet slammed again. Darren fell, and the transmission was interrupted. After I lost signal with Darren, something inside me broke. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. I couldn't enter the house, I couldn't help, but I could investigate, and that's what I did. I went back to the old files. Something told me this house, this damn house, had done this before. In the basement of the power station, among moldy boxes and reports archived decades ago, I found the newspapers of the time. Amanda Rhodes, 17 years old, disappeared in 1996. Last seen exactly in that house, after a fight with his mother. The police, at the time, registered the case as an escape. But the mother, she said something else. I found a yellowed newspaper clipping. My daughter was taken from the house. She screams in the hallways. The headline mocked the woman as if she were crazy. But now, I knew she was telling the truth. In the reports, the mother described that Amanda heard voices, laughter, whispers at night, that she drew pictures, distorted faces, all with their mouths open in a frozen scream, that she started saying that the house spoke to her, that there was something in the basement that was calling her name. As I read it, the details matched what Darren was experiencing. And then something else caught my attention. Amanda's diary, recovered weeks before the disappearance. It was filed away as forgotten evidence. I leafed through it carefully. The pages began with the common rants of a lonely teenager. But, little by little, she plunged into darkness. Today the door slammed shut by itself. Mom can't believe it. I heard someone calling me. It was my voice, but older. She's in the mirror now. She smiles when I cry. I said I can stay forever if I accept. The last few pages were just scribbles, concentric circles, empty eyes, and a name repeated dozens of times. Father of Bones, Father of Bones, Father of Bones. I started putting the puzzle together. The entity in the house, the Bone Father, seemed to feed on pain, on loneliness. He isolated his victims. He stole memories. He distorted time until the person ceased to exist, and it became part of the house. It was then that I realized Darren was going through the same cycle, and more. The house chose. It wasn't random. Darren had lost his sister years before, in a car accident, never got over it, never talked about it. The house knew, and offered to him what I wanted most in the world, a chance to hear her voice one more time. That was the bond. Amanda, before him, was also looking for something. Love, acceptance, belonging. The house didn't haunt. The house seduced. I called the center and asked for the property's internal reports. I discovered that this was not the first call from the house's landline number. In 2004, in 2011, in 2018. Always at 2:13 in the morning. Always with laughter in the background. and no sign of activity when the patrol arrived. But only Darren entered. Just Darren was called by name. In the last folder, I found something that made me shudder. A recording, a cassette tape, recorded by a police officer who dropped the case in 1998. In it, Amanda's mother reports something that has never been made public. The house showed me the future. It showed Amanda at 30, faceless, a body, but no soul. She was in the corners, in the mirrors, laughing, calling for help, but her eyes told her it was too late. Pauses for a while, and I cried. Darren was stuck in that cycle. Amanda was still there, and the house wanted more. I knew that if no one found him, if no one interrupted the ritual, he would become the next name scratched on the closet door. Or worse, he would become the new echo of the house. It was almost 5 in the morning that reinforcements arrived at the property. 3 patrol cars, 2 sniffer dogs, a forensic team, but no one came in right away. The officers stood motionless before the gate, as if something invisible held them by the throat. They only entered when the sun threatened to break through the sky, and even with the day breaking, the house seemed darker than ever. The radios picked up the first steps inside. No sign of Darren, no response to call. The upstairs was empty. The attic was locked from the inside. But then, one of the dogs started barking frantically. He ran towards the kitchen, and he stopped before a nearly invisible lever under the wooden floor. A trap door. With much effort, the lid was opened, and the smell that rose from there was not human. It was dense, rotten, metallic, a mixture of wet earth, rotting bones, and something alive. 2 police officers got out, and I followed everything on the radio. Each step echoed like a hammer on a coffin. At the end of the basement was a hand-dug tunnel, lined with cracked boards and nail marks on the walls. And then, finally, they found the body, but it wasn't Darren. Era Amanda, or rather, what was left of it, mummified remains, still wearing a white cotton dress. On her wrist, a bracelet with the name Amanda R. But the most disturbing thing was around the body. Countless children's toys, lined up as if on an altar, all with their eyes gouged out. And on the walls, photos. Hundreds of faces scribbled, torn, pasted with sickening precision. Among them, Darren's face. And an empty space next to it, with the phrase, "One more for the family." At that moment, one of the police officers shouted. There was something stuck to the basement ceiling. Teeth, human teeth, arranged in a spiral, like a nest. And in the center, a word carved with something sharp. Welcome. Minutes later, a scream echoed through the house. It was the second agent. He had found Darren, in the deepest corner of the basement, curled up like a child hugging a rag doll, eyes open, glazed. But he was still alive. It took 3 people to get him out. He murmured the same name, over and over. She didn't want to hurt anyone, she just wanted someone to be with her. Amanda didn't want to be forgotten, and at home, didn't let anyone leave. As they carried him away, Darren turned his head and looked at the basement door, and he smiled, a slight smile, as if leaving something behind, or someone. But what gives me the most chills to this day was what he said as he was put into the ambulance. Now she's with me. She's not alone anymore. Darren was taken to the hospital in a catatonic state. The official report speaks of nervous breakdown, extreme trauma, possible exposure to decomposition gas. But we know that wasn't the case. He survived physically. But the Darren we knew did not return from that basement. In the days that followed, the case took over the local newspapers. Police find bones of young woman missing for 30 years. Willow Hill cursed house under investigation again. But as always, everything dissolved into reports, expert assessments, and bureaucracy. The house was sealed. Police put up warning signs. No one else climbed that hill. No one. Officially. 2 weeks later, someone broke the seal. Nearby cameras, in which previously recorded nothing there, captured a figure entering alone at dawn. The face was obscured, but the walk was familiar. Time, the body, hits with Darren. He disappeared that same night, without leaving a trace, without saying goodbye. To this day, the case is listed as voluntarily abandoned. but I know the truth. I listened to the recording, the last communication that no one else had access to. At 2:13 in the morning, the radio at the headquarters rang by itself, without anyone being on the other side, and by the frequency, a voice echoed in Amanda's voice. She said, "Now he's not alone anymore, and neither will you be." The radio exploded into noise soon after, and since then, every night at 2:13 a.m., my terminal blinks on its own. No calls, no numbers, just static and a distant laugh. The house on the hill is still there. Closed, yes, but not empty. She chews, she wait, and one day, we'll call for you too. The story of Hill House doesn't end with Darren's disappearance. In fact, it never ends, because home isn't just a place. It's an echo, a distorted reflection of what we hide. Traumas, losses, fears. It attracts those who miss something, or someone, and it offers exactly what they want. In return, just everything. Since that night, other calls have been recorded. Other figures have been seen climbing the hill, and they all disappeared in the same way. Maybe the house is still there, waiting. Maybe it's already moved closer than you think, and maybe you'll be the next name scratched on the closet door. If this story gave you chills, you need to check out our exclusive ebook, No Forbidden Files, True Stories of Terror. You'll find even darker cases based on police files, forgotten diaries, and recordings that never reached the public. These are stories that never made it into the newspapers, but continue to haunt those who dare listen. Click on the link below and dive into a world where fear is real and silence hides screams. Because real horror isn't in movies, it's in the stories no one had the courage to tell.